My husband said it to me in the calmest voice, like he was just talking about dinner. I'm sleeping with your best friend. If you can't handle it, you can leave. I looked at him. Then I looked at Kira. She was standing right next to Trent, arms crossed, head tilted, not even trying to look away. They were standing so close that I realized they weren't hiding anything anymore. And the thing that chilled me the most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the way they said it, like I didn't belong in the room. But if you want to understand how we got to that moment, we have to go back 6 months. Back when everything still looked normal. At least to me. My name is Marai. I work in financial consulting. The job makes me familiar with spreadsheets, risk, and thinking one step ahead so I don't make mistakes. I'm the quiet type, the kind who relies on logic more than promises. Because of that, from the very beginning of our relationship, I was always the one planning, stabilizing, and carrying the hard parts. I didn't mind. When you love someone, you want to lighten their load. Trent, my husband, looked successful from the outside. He spoke with confidence, knew how to make an impression, knew how to charm people. But at home, he relied on the stability I built. My finances, my plans, my carefulness. Trent liked being seen as the provider, but he avoided everything a provider is supposed to do. And over time, he acted like me, carrying everything was just the natural order of things. And then there was Kira. She'd been my best friend since college. Fun, outgoing, a little impulsive, and always able to make people feel like she deserved to be taken care of. I used to think that small streak of selfishness was just her being childish. I was wrong. 3 months before everything blew up, Kira started showing up at my house more often. At first it was, I want to help you relax. Then it became, I'll come over for dinner, just for fun. Then somehow it turned into, Trent's free so he can drive me home. It's on his way anyway. I didn't think much of it. I'm not the type of woman who polices her best friend or her husband. But little things, tiny things, started making me pause for a second. Trent did very little but always wanted to spend a lot. Those fancy dinners, he said, I've got it. Somehow the bill ended up on my card because your cashback is better. When I came home late from work, he never asked how my day was. He only asked, did you pay the insurance this month? One night, I joked that I was tired from carrying too many responsibilities. Trent shrugged. You're better at this stuff than I am. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. A short sentence, but when you're doing the work of 2 people, it weighs more than you expect. And then there was Kira. She started giving me comments that sounded caring but cut a little. You should take better care of yourself so Trent doesn't get bored. Or you're lucky. A husband who listens is hard to find. I didn't suspect anything, but I noted it, not to draw conclusions, just to see if these tiny pieces would eventually form the shape of something bigger. One evening, I got home earlier than usual. The living room light was on. I heard Trent and Kira laughing. Nothing looked wrong from the outside, but when I stepped in, they both flinched for half a second. Just a tiny beat, but enough to change the air in the room. Kira spoke a little too casually, a little too fast. Oh, we're just watching a show. Want to join? I smiled, didn't ask anything. But I saw Trent glance at Kira as if waiting for her to say the next line. Like they had a private story I wasn't part of. In the days after, other signs started to show. Trent came home later, without the smell of drinks or work, just a smell that felt unfamiliar. Kira called me less, but texted Trent more. Mostly unimportant things like, that dish was really good, or don't forget to send me that link. Once, I saw Trent lock his phone quickly when I walked into the room. He smiled at me like I'd interrupted a private moment between him and his own screen. And when I asked gently, who was that? He answered right away. Work stuff. You're probably overthinking again. I wasn't overthinking. I was just tracking everything in my head, the way a financial consultant notes every number that doesn't add up. No clear evidence, no romantic messages, no catching anyone in the act. Just scattered little pieces. Not enough to accuse anyone, but enough for me to know. Something was off. Something was shifting inside the home I thought I understood. And I had no idea those tiny pieces were leading me straight to the day Trent stood in front of me, next to the best friend I once treated like family, and said the sentence that changed the direction of my life. From those small signs that told me something was wrong, things started to shift faster than I expected. Not through big actions, but through details so small that if I'd been a little less clear-headed, I would have thought I was imagining them. It all started with the mortgage application. That day, Trent texted me. The bank called. They said my loan file needs you as a co-signer, just so they feel secure. When I got home, he already had the paperwork laid out on the table. I asked, "Why do I need to be on it?" Trent shrugged. "You know why. You manage things better than I do, and my credit isn't as high as yours. They want someone stable on the file." He said it so casually, like using my name to take on a huge loan was the most natural thing in the world. He even pre-signed a few pages and pushed the stack toward me with a small smile. "You just need to sign. You're good at this stuff. I trust you." That trust, if you looked closely, was really just him dodging responsibility. But I didn't overthink it. I only felt clearly that he was getting comfortable with handing me everything the two of us were supposed to share. In the weeks after, Trent started saying things that sounded normal on their own, but strung together were anything but normal. "Can you check this for me? I don't get this new interest rate thing. Can you cover the car payment this month? I forgot. My card hit the limit. I'll use yours, okay?" He said it like it was just everyday stuff, nothing to think about. And I, already used to keeping everything steady, stepped in to handle it again. But what made me pause was how often he repeated, "You manage things better than I do." It wasn't a compliment anymore. It was an excuse. While I was busy juggling everything, Kira started showing up in a new role, the person who was always there for Trent whenever he needed something. One day, I saw her standing in my driveway, leaning on Trent's car. I asked, "Who are you waiting for?" Kira smiled and pointed at the door. "Trent," he said, "it's on his way to drop me off." On his way. That phrase showed up so many times it became meaningless. In the days after, they started going places together more often. Kira sent me a few food photos with the message, "Trent said this dish would be perfect for you." But around that same time, I noticed she was texting Trent at hours she'd never reached out before. Nothing romantic. Just things like, "Are you on your way yet?" Or "Don't forget to grab that thing from last time." But added to them riding home together, lingering in the driveway, and having private conversations I couldn't hear, everything started tilting in a way that was hard to explain away. One night I asked Trent, "What did Kira text you?" He laughed. "Oh, come on, you're being too sensitive. She just asked me to pick up a bottle of sauce for her." He touched my shoulder like he was smoothing over something small. But what he said next made me freeze for a moment. "You need to relax. You're seeing everything in a negative light." I wasn't negative. I was connecting the dots. But he managed to make me question myself. Was I imagining it? Gaslighting doesn't need big, dramatic lines. Sometimes all it takes is the same "you're too sensitive" said at exactly the right moment. And Trent used that line very smoothly. Then money started becoming a weight I couldn't name right away. Because Trent's credit was low, the house was in my name. Because he kept forgetting things, the utility bills were in my name. Because he didn't like paperwork, the car was in my name too. Because he spent more than he earned, the shared card was under my name to make it easier to manage. More and more, I felt less like someone's wife, and more like a financial hub holding everything together. Every time Trent missed a payment he was supposed to handle, the late fee hit my account. He only ever said one thing. "Can you take care of it for me? It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. Another familiar line. The small fees didn't make me poor, but they showed how naturally he expected me to carry everything for him. One night, while we were having dinner, with Kira there too, she said thoughtfully, "Mirai, you should let Trent put his name on a few things so he can grow up a little. Men need responsibility, you know." It sounded like advice, but the way she glanced at Trent, full of suggestion, made me sit up straighter. Trent heard her say that, and nodded. Like she'd touched on something he'd been wanting to hear for a long time. He thought he deserved to own something valuable, even if most of it came from me. I looked at the two of them, said nothing, but I added it to the list of things that were just wrong enough that I couldn't ignore them. In the following weeks, the tension in the house didn't rise through arguments. It rose through silence. Trent came home later. No explanation, no apology. Kira texted me less, but posted more stories of herself sitting in Trent's car. Trent stopped asking me about finances because he was used to me doing everything myself, and I started feeling more and more like a guest in my own life. One Friday night, Trent walked into the room with a stack of bills, set them on the table, and said in a tired voice, "Pay these for me. I'm too busy." I looked at the bills in my name, the late fees from his missed payments, the loans I was responsible for, and for the first time, I didn't lift my hand to do what I'd always done. I just asked one question. Do you feel like things are a little off? Trent looked up, frowned. Off how? You're overthinking again. I really am busy. And that's when I realized. No matter what I said, he would turn it into my fault. Not because I was wrong, but because he needed me to be wrong so everything he was doing could seem normal. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt one thing, very clearly. Something big was forming between Trent and Kira, but they were hiding it just well enough that I couldn't point at it yet. I didn't understand what they were aiming for, but I knew one thing for sure. Those two were not just close. And the tension in my home, the one I'd been trying to ignore, was growing, little by little, exactly the way betrayal stories usually begin. It was a Saturday afternoon. I needed to grab a jacket I'd left in Trent's car. He was showering, so I went down to the garage to get it myself. I opened the trunk, not expecting anything. But the first thing I saw wasn't my jacket. It was a green stone bracelet, the exact kind Kira had worn since college. She once told me her dad gave it to her, and she kept it like a treasure, never letting anyone touch it. And there it was, sitting neatly in my husband's car, right after he'd told me he was out working with a colleague. I stood still for a few seconds, not shocked, not jealous, just watching every piece in my head slide into its rightful place. I picked up the bracelet and turned it in my hand. The dust on it made it clear it had been there for days, not by accident. And I knew one thing. Someone careless doesn't leave evidence this obvious. The next afternoon, Kira asked me out for drinks. She spoke like nothing had happened. You've been so busy lately, it's hard to catch you. We sat by the window. Kira talked about work, about someone new she was seeing, little things. I listened, didn't ask much. But when she mentioned one simple sentence, everything stopped. Last week, Trent and I stopped by that curry place on Maple. You'd love it. Next time, come with us. I set my drink down. My hand froze. Because just a week before, Trent told me he was out of town with a colleague, and Maple was the one place he once took me on a special occasion, the place he said he wanted just for the two of us. Only one person knew that story, Trent. I never told anyone, not even Kira. Yet she talked about it like that place belonged to them. I looked at her. Kira smiled, perfectly natural, but there was a glance, quick, subtle, the kind people give to something they secretly possess and feel proud of. I didn't react. I didn't say a word. But in my mind, every story had clicked into place so clearly it couldn't be denied. That night, I waited for Trent in the living room. I didn't turn on the lights. When he opened the door, the hallway light hit his face, enough for me to see the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He asked, "What are you doing sitting here?" I didn't answer the question. I just held up the bracelet. "Kira left this in your car." Trent looked at it for a moment, then sighed. Not the kind of sigh someone lets out when they're sorry, but the kind someone gives when they've been caught doing something they're tired of hiding. He said, "I guess you already figured it out." I didn't blink. "How long?" Trent didn't answer right away, but then Kira stepped out from the kitchen. I had no idea when she got there. Maybe they thought I'd be home late. Maybe they thought they'd have another private night. She stood behind Trent, arms crossed. No apology, no shame. She looked like someone who just won a game the other player didn't know they were in. I asked again, my voice so calm, it made both of them stop for a second. "How long?" Trent looked straight at me, and with the coldest tone he'd ever used on me, he said the line he'd probably rehearsed for the day he planned to throw me away. "I'm sleeping with your best friend. If you can't handle it, you can leave." Kira didn't say a word, but the slight curl of her mouth said it for her. "Go. We've already won." I just looked at them, like I was watching two strangers who had finally taken their masks off. In that moment, what hurt wasn't the betrayal. It was how certain they were that I would break, that I would cry, beg, or fall apart, that I would shrink myself just to keep someone who had already chosen to betray me. They forgot one thing. I was the one whose name was on everything they relied on. Trent truly believed that if I left, he would get the house because he was the one living in it. He believed the furniture automatically belonged to the one who stays. He believed I'd walk away from the joint account, the car, and all the things he couldn't even qualify to own on paper. He really believed I depended on this marriage more than I depended on myself. But the harsh truth was much simpler. The house was in my name. The loan was in my name. The car was in my name. The cards were in my name. The bills were in my name. Every service contract was tied to my credit. If I walked away, I wouldn't lose a thing. Only one person, actually two, would be left to manage the life they thought they wanted. Dependence was never mine. It was Trent's, and he had no idea. I stood up, took Kira's bracelet, and placed it in her hand. She flinched a little, like she didn't expect me to stay calm. I said quietly, "You want me to go?" "Fine." In Trent's eyes, there was a flash of relief. As if he thought everything would get easier once I stepped out. As if he believed he'd won, and life afterward would be his reward. He didn't know that the moment I said those words, I had already seen the future he never once considered. And I knew one thing for sure: they wouldn't survive what was waiting for them. After I said, "You want me to go? Fine," I didn't pack my things right away. Leaving in that moment would only make them think they'd won. That I was hurt enough to run. I wasn't running. I just needed time to prepare to give them exactly what they asked for. And the first thing I did was look at our entire shared life, piece by piece. What belonged to me, what Trent assumed belonged to him, and what he would be forced to carry once I left. The next morning, Trent looked relieved to the point of being obvious. He was even whistling as he walked into the kitchen. Kira was wearing one of his t-shirts like she was officially the new woman in the house. I didn't say a word to either of them. I just made tea, opened my laptop, and started reorganizing everything Trent had always treated as my responsibility. I remembered very clearly the line he repeated over and over, "I'm the man of this house." All right, if he was the man of the house, then he'd take on everything a man of the house is supposed to handle. Every contract, every bill, every fee, every responsibility he'd avoided throughout our entire marriage. First was the house. The house was in my name. I held the loan. I paid the insurance. Trent just lived there and liked to feel powerful because he was the only man in the house. I contacted the bank to adjust the account. I didn't transfer ownership to Trent. I'm not stupid. I simply rerouted the payment responsibility to the account Trent always claimed was his stable income. Nothing illegal, nothing dishonest. He wanted to be the one in charge? He could be. He wanted to carry things? He could carry them. Next were the utilities: electricity, water, internet, insurance. All of them ran through my credit. I called each company and asked to update the responsible payer to Trent. Kira stood behind me while I did it, still thinking I was just handling things like usual. She didn't understand that every step I took was one brick lifted off my shoulders and placed onto Trent's. Then came the shared card. It was under my name, and Trent loved using it because the limit was high and it never got declined. I canceled the card. No warning, no reminder. I just cut it up and tossed it in a drawer. I sat down, looked around the house, and wrote a list of the things I wanted to keep. A few books, some personal items, my laptop, a few outfits. Everything else, I left it. Not because I cared about it, but because those things no longer belonged to the life I was choosing. 3 days later, Trent started getting irritated. The electric bill didn't auto-pay like it used to. The internet sent a warning. The car needed maintenance, and the system sent the notice to his email. Not mine. That night, he frowned and said, "Did you forget to pay some of the bills? The house is about to get the power cut." I replied softly, "You're the one on the accounts now. You handle it." Kira turned to look at Trent, her face shifting slightly. She hadn't expected me to drop the role of the one who handles everything. They thought I'd leave in shame, not leave them with a life that actually required competence to maintain. Trent snapped. "Why did you change everything all of a sudden? Are you trying to make things hard for me?" I looked up, calm and flat. "You wanted to be the man of this house. I'm respecting that." Trent went quiet. He didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, I saw him without a single excuse. Thursday morning, I decided to leave. I woke up while the air was still cool and packed my things in silence. Not much. One small suitcase was enough for the new life I'd already planned in my head from the moment they stood together and admitted the affair. I folded my clothes and gathered the things that mattered to me. I didn't take anything that belonged to the house. I didn't need to carry their memories with me. Trent and Kira were still asleep in the bedroom. I could still hear their laughter from the night before. No pain, no jealousy, just a clear understanding that those two deserved each other. Same short-sightedness, same hollow confidence. Before leaving, I set the keys on the table, right next to the overdue bill reminder Trent had tossed there the night before. I wrote a single line in the calmest handwriting I had. You wanted me to go, so I'm giving everything back to you. Not one extra word. No goodbye. No explanation. Because none was needed. An hour later, as I pulled my suitcase toward the door, I saw Kira's car parked out front. She got out with a big bag, her face so bright she looked like she was about to go on vacation. It wasn't until she saw me with the suitcase that she froze a little. But only for a second. She gave me a small smile. The smile of someone who thinks they've just claimed the official spot. You really leaving? Her voice couldn't hide the excitement. I just said, yeah, wish you two the best. No bitterness, no sarcasm, just a simple wish, and I meant it. Because they would need every bit of luck in the world to survive the life they thought would be so easy. Kira lifted her bag and walked into the house with the attitude of its new owner. She had no idea that in just a few days, Trent would realize their dream life was actually a chain of responsibilities, bills, overdue payments, renewal notices, penalties, all hitting him at the same time. She didn't know that what they had taken wasn't my life. It was the burden I had been quietly carrying for both of them for years. I stood on the doorstep for a few seconds and looked at the house one last time. No regret, no longing, only one thing left in me. Relief. I stepped down the stairs and pulled my suitcase with me. The sky was bright, not cold, not rainy. A quiet enough morning for me to know I'd made the right choice. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was simply walking out of a life that no longer belonged to me. Calm, clear, no drama. The first problem hit them with the mortgage. The bank sent a payment reminder earlier than usual. Trent opened the email and frowned. Kira looked over his shoulder and asked, "Why? Isn't it always auto-paid?" Trent forced a laugh. "Yeah, must be a system error." But when the due date came, the bank tried to pull the payment from Trent's account. The account that never had enough balance, because I'd always handled that part. The payment failed. Late fees stacked up, and that one big loan was enough to keep him awake at night. Kira sat on the couch, worried for the first time since she won the official spot. "You didn't tell me this loan was that big." Trent snapped. "You think I like wasting money? This house isn't even under my name." That line made Kira blink. She finally realized the house she thought would be hers didn't belong to anyone except me. And I was gone. The second problem was the utilities. That night, the lights flickered a few times and then went out completely. Kira jumped. What was that? Trent checked the electrical panel, then muttered a curse when he saw the overdue notice taped right to the front door. No way, how did it get to this point? This has never happened before. Kira looked at him, annoyed. "I thought you said you could handle this." "I thought she..." Trent bit his tongue and didn't finish. They both went silent. It was the first time they understood something I'd known for years. Life only looked smooth because I was the one keeping it that way. And when I pulled my hands out, everything collapsed faster than they could brace for. The third problem was the credit card. They went to the supermarket. Kira pushed a cart full of things she wanted for their new living space. Trent swiped the card. Declined. He tried again, forcing a smile. Probably just a network issue. He tried a third time. Still declined. Kira crossed her arms. "You said you could handle the money." "This card has always worked." Trent snapped, but they both knew why. The card was under my name, and I had canceled it that morning while Trent was still asleep. They ended up leaving the cart behind and walking to the car in silence. For the first time, Kira's excitement about their new life started to crack. In the days after, the utility reminders kept coming. Late fees stacked up, the bank called, the internet got cut off, the car insurance demanded renewal. And every single thing landed on Trent, the man who was only now learning what it actually meant to be the man of the house. Kira started getting visibly irritated. She couldn't understand why the life she thought would be better had turned into a mess in just a few days. One night, while the two of them were arguing because the electricity got cut for the second time that week, I got a call from Trent. His voice was rushed, annoyed, almost panicked. "Mirai, what did you do to this life? Why is everything falling apart?" I looked at the screen for a moment before lifting the phone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't pleased. I just felt justified. I answered calmly, every word clear. "I didn't do anything. I just gave you exactly what you asked for. I left. The rest is what you thought belonged to you." The line went completely silent. Then I heard Trent's heavy breathing. The first time in his life he understood he'd lost the one thing holding his world together. He tried to say something, but I hung up before he could start. Kira couldn't last long either. In the next few days, she finally saw the truth she denied so she could confidently step into my life. Trent couldn't handle anything. Not finances, not responsibility, not the future. One night, their argument got loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Kira yelled, "You told me you could handle everything. Turns out the whole life you bragged about was something she built for you?" Trent shouted back, "You think I knew?" I thought. Then they started blaming each other, the way cheaters always do when the little kingdom they built together starts to collapse. They weren't on the same side anymore. They weren't winners like the day they stood in front of me. Because their victory was never real. It only existed as long as I held everything together, and I had pulled my hands away. And me? I lived in a small apartment I rented on my own within my means. Not big, not fancy, but it belonged to me in the purest way. No one clinging to me. No one relying on me. No one demanding silent sacrifice. I went to work in the mornings, watered my plants in the afternoons, bought a few little things to decorate the room. Everything I touched felt light, nothing tied to anyone. Nothing carrying the weight of the past. I didn't check on Trent and Kira. I didn't wait to see how long they'd keep fighting. I didn't care whether they stayed together or fell apart. Their life no longer belonged to me, and mine finally became my own. The last week before I fully moved into my new apartment, I repacked my suitcase again. Not to leave, but to remind myself that I survived something people sometimes stay trapped in for a lifetime. There was a time I thought marriage meant trying, holding on, and enduring. But it turns out growing up is sometimes just letting go, and letting everything fall where it's meant to. I locked the door of my temporary apartment, stepped outside, and felt as light as someone starting over after a storm. I said one quiet sentence to myself, almost like a reminder. One day they'll understand. I didn't get revenge. I just let go of their life. And everything else settled on its own. And I kept walking, with a peace they will never get back. In the end, what I learned is this. Sometimes you don't need revenge. You just need to walk away from a place that no longer deserves you, and the truth will take care of the rest. When you leave, the things built on lies crumble naturally. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening all the way through. If you were in Marai's situation, would you leave or stay? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.